public policy. There's something I want to, yes, thank you, Frank, for putting in the recording. And he has told me to inform you that the what will be live on YouTube so that people can be able to follow even after the training has been done. Now, I work for an organization called World Vision International. World Vision is a Christian humanitarian development and advocacy organization that works to uplift children and the most vulnerable communities from poverty so that they can have life in its fullness. And why I've given you the example of World Vision is for those of us into the humanitarian work. I know ActionAid is also registered as a humanitarian organization. We tend to do what is called as relief. Now, when we are doing relief, for instance, you go in, let's say, imagine after the Konyi War in northern Uganda, you are doing reconstruction, you are giving people cash handouts, you are building schools, you are bringing capital to the people, you are building health centers, you are doing almost everything, but that is the work of government. What we tend to do, we as humanitarian organizations, is the work of government. I know, for instance, yes, I review our budgets at an annual basis for the area programs we are in, for the districts we are in, and you find them budgeting for construction of a health center, construction of a hospital, construction of a maternity ward, construction of a lighting system, construction of this, that. Now, when non-state actors like NGOs or government partners, let's say UNICEF, Irish Aid, USAID, name them, when they begin doing the work of government, they begin killing their policy-making process. I mean the policy influence process, because as non-state actors, actually, the term civil society is very big. It encompasses just not NGOs. It encompasses religious institutions, churches, Catholic Church, Anglican Church, Pentecostals, the Muslims, and then those of us who are traditionalists. Don't say this about the traditionalists, I'm making fun. It encompasses the media. It encompasses the private sector foundation, the industrialists, Uganda Manufacturing Association, and everything. That is what is known as civil society. All that for us in Uganda, we narrow it down to NGOs, the non-government organizations, the international government organizations, and then the government partners. But it is bigger than that. It is any other person that is not in government. That is what is known as civil society. And the problems we have in making and influencing policy as civil society is that we concentrate on doing the work of government, which is development work, by giving services to the people. No, we are not supposed to be giving services to the people. We should be awakening people to demand for those services from the government directly into power. So when we construct hospitals, I know before I joined World Vision, I was very, very, very much pronounced in ActionAid circles, and I was visiting some of the clusters they have in different areas. You would find this school was constructed by ActionAid. If we do that work, it means we are becoming a government on our own, and we shall stop influencing policy. The second one is that as people involved in policy influence and policy and legislative advocacy, we don't have enough base for data research and knowledge that we can base on to effectively influence policy. Now, when you don't have the data, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the information, it becomes hard for you to make policy positions that people would base on to learn and know, let us be able to influence policy. That is the second thing. So as people, I will take you through, we shall take you through it in the course of the week. How do you begin creating that knowledge base, that database, that evidence base that you can base on to influence policy and influence government action? So the third one is an coordination. We tend to work in silos. My animal is my animal. I'm ActionAid. I'm influencing youth policy. That's what I am on. I don't want to see any other person come. My young son, Elijah runs Women of Destiny. Says, no, for us, we are Women Empowerment Fund. Outside that, we're not interested in it. Now, when you begin working in silos, you curtail, you inhibit your abilities to effectively address policy. So, because you're working in silos, you're working as groups, you're working in isolation, we are facing it rough in influencing policy. The fourth is to do with the state dynamics. The body politic of the current state is one that is in constant violation with any other person that is deemed to be hostile to it. And also, in some way, we have to blame as people in civil society that we create a hostile environment for the state. We tend to make civil society look like the organized opposition. That what opposition cannot do, we as civil society can do, because we can be able to collect money from donors, we can be able to do this. So every time we are calling press conference, we are not giving alternatives. No, we are just bashing, we are ambassading, we are admonishing, we are abusing, we are insulting, we are attacking what government is doing. So when you attack government, you make it confrontational, you make it defensive, you don't make it engaging, you don't make it inclusive. So when you lose on those facets, you can't be able to say, let's call a member of parliament and influence a piece of legislation in parliament. Let me engage a commissioner and show him different policy alternatives for a certain policy issue, on a certain budget issue. So if we remain with the narrative that civil society to be in civil society must be in a position, you want to be able to influence policy. Someone asked me, there's a person I was mentoring around policy and advocacy, and asked me, how would you do it? And I told them, advocacy, which is almost policy advocacy the same. Well, advocacy and policy can't be turned out from the other. For advocacy, to be good in advocacy, it is like investigative journalism. Investigative journalism, you are as good as your sources. Whom do you know? Which phone calls can you make? Which sources do you have? Someone calls you an investigative journalist and so on. Today we shall be carrying out a raid on bars in Kampala. So position your cameras here and you'll get the poor in the bars. Now, when you break a story that people have been arrested and you have captured them live in a bar, we'll say, this is one of the best journalists we have. If you capture someone who's being arrested, who's maybe you see these things that Serwaja used to run, defined by my father, stealing from the sick. Now, if you have a right source, you'll be able to get the right information and people will praise you, you will inform decisions. Now, it's the same thing with policy and advocacy. The sources you have, the phone calls you can make will determine how much you can be able to do. When I joined the children rights movement, One Vision, what Save the Children, they had been struggling with a bill.
I think we've lost Prosper.
I am working from home, and when I'm working from home, you can be sure people will call me, and I'm tethering with my phone.
Okay.
But sorry about it, I'm going to disable calls so that people stop calling me. You know, when I was at the campus, one of our girls was called during a lecture. I said, that's the problem of dating car wash. They don't know that this is time for life. My problem is having friends who are car washers. They don't know that it's time for work now. No, I was saying, to be good in advocacy, you are as good as your sources. You are as good as your networks, as your connection. So stop the crap of saying that you can be in confrontation to the state and you run advocacy. No, you don't need to be doing activism, and activism are not rarely to bring results. So create those networks. I will take you through it. I'm just giving it 8 bits. So now we are coming to policy. What is policy? Public policy.
Prosper, are you still there? Okay, sorry about that. We've again lost him, but I think he's trying to join again. He's joining. We are sorry. Yeah, we over losing Prosper. Yeah, I think it's his network, but sorry about that. Just a minute for him to come in again.
I'm sorry, car washers are becoming car washers, but I, I'm trying to connect to a new network that will save me from being called every now and then. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah,
Frank, confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
I
hear
was
you.
saying public policy is simply what public policy is simply what the government chooses to do or not to do. So public policy becomes the direction of government, and by nature, because why there are many definitions of public policy is because we have a multifaceted complexity of the problems we face as a society. They are fuzzy, they are ill-defined. Most of them have political, yet others have purely technical aspects. You know, there are political problems. For instance, the problem on bail is not a technical problem. It's a political problem. So when you come with only a political nature and you craft a public policy around it, for instance, denial of bail, then you are likely to have political consequences for the politically motivated policy you came up with. So when you run by the political aspects of a problem and you forget technical aspects of it, then we have a multifaceted complexity and dynamic for the problem we're trying to solve. Third, the nature of public problems in most of the hybrid democracies like Uganda is they often lack a good cause-effect knowledge base. The person who won the Nobel Peace Prize for this year in economics, his thesis was based on that the line between a cause and effect relationship is darkness. Now, when we have problems that don't have a good cause and effect knowledge base, then we shall have these problems we face with defining what public policy is. I don't know if I can give you an example of them, cause effect relationship. I will come to it later. Then some problems we have can only be solved by producing new problems. I don't know if you understand that. That the nature of the problems we have, they can only be solved by producing new problems. And that one normally applies in political science, that you solve a problem by creating a problem. You solve the massacre killings by arresting innocent MPs. So you're creating a constitutional problem to solve a criminal problem. And then also the nature of the problems we have in most of the countries we have is that they involve trade-offs between cost and effectiveness. I can give you one of them is when we are creating new districts and administrative units. We're having a trade-off. What is the cost? What is the effectiveness? It is a give and take. Creating new kingdoms. There is Uganda, then you create the Sabanyara, you create the one of which is called, I'm forgetting. You are in Kasesa, you have the Musinga, then you create the one of the Bamba, you create the, so it is always a trade-off between cost and effectiveness. We are solving this problem, but at what cost? What of the effectiveness we are having? In 1962, we had, I think, about 12 districts. Now we are in about 152 districts. Has effectiveness increased? So That's the nature of the problems we have, and it's always, you must appreciate that when we are coming to it, it is because of we are organically growing the governance, we are growing government, we are growing our democracy, and some of these things are about to happen. Then some of the problems we have is that when we provide solutions for them, it is very hard or next to impossible to find solutions for them. So because of that, we always get issues defining what public policy is. What is public policy? That's why I gave you the simplest definition of it is public policy is what the government chooses to do or not to do. It is government action or inaction. If you have a road going to Chitasa and it's not tarmacked, you have complained about that nothing is being done. That is what the government has chosen not to do. So it is the public policy of government on that road. If you see people complaining of Kavera and the effects it has on the environment, on people's health, and the government is not doing anything about it, because the economic benefits associated with people selling Kavera and the taxes the government gets. So the policy of the inaction on the Kavera issue is government policy. And when we come to advocacy now, when we begin thinking about advocacy will mainly be on influencing government action and inaction. What you want government to do, or even actually influencing it not to act. For instance, where those people in NGOs who are promoting LGBTQ rights, they would want to influence the government not to act, not to pass any legislation on LGBTQ. Why? Because the state, the environment as it is favorable for their well-being. Or let's imagine the government wants to pass a law and is saying we are allowing corporal punishment in schools. And I want to advocate. As a child rights advocate, I will not advocate for the law to be passed. No, I will advocate for the maintenance of the status quo. So by instance, I am influencing government in action. I am influencing government to choose not to do. I don't know if you are getting on that. So the meaning of public policy has changed over the years. It begins with the creation of the policy sciences, which was the study of policy as a field, and is associated mainly with a man known as Harold Laswell. He began his writings in the 1950s. In 1956, he introduced the concept of the policy sciences, and it was mainly based on the usage of the policy process. I will take you through the policy process at around 11. The policy process approach. If you want to influence policy, there is a process that you follow, from formulation, what up to termination of the policy. And he argued that the science of policy had 3 distinct characteristics which set it apart from other disciplines. I'm talking as an academic now. And the first one is it is multidisciplinary. The second one is the biggest intention of the policy is problem solving. And the third is the public policy must be normative. So as a multidisciplinary science, it should break away from the narrow study of political institutional structures and embrace the work and findings of fields like sociology, economics, law, and politics. That's why policy now is looked at as the silent arm of politics. And policy formulation is looked at as turning politics into policy. If NRM is having a manifesto as they are campaigning, how do you turn the manifesto into actionable points? So you get the manifesto and draft it to a National Development Plan 3. So that you begin actualizing the manifesto of the ruling party, and it begins working. Economics, how do you bring policy? How do you bring politics into economics? That's why those who have been at FEMA, there is a course called political economy. You are studying you're beginning to integrate politics into economics, integrate economics into politics. What is the relationship? And that's why you have this man, Adam Smith, 1776, writing about the wealth of nations and saying that it is, for you to be wealthy, you must have power. For you to have power, you must be wealthy. So either use your wealth to have power or use your power to maintain your wealth. Now, with politics, we shall be getting there. The problem solving. It should adhere to a strict canon of the problems and should not be academic. As is, we are academic. our policy solutions are academic. They don't take into perspective the real happenings of the of a real world. We are too elitist, and policy is elitist, I would say. So Russell was trying to break from the norm of an elitist policy of people who speak GDP, Gini coefficient, what, and which don't speak into the real problems of the people. Then it should be normative. When I say normative, it should be prescriptive. You are prescribing. You have gone to a hospital. Someone says you have high temperature, so go and take Panadol. It will help you to calm the situation you are in. So policy science should not be masked in the guise of scientific objectivity, but should rather recognize the impossibility of separating goals and means, or values and techniques in the study of government actions and inactions. So beyond objectivity, how do we get rationality into it? How do we get realism into it? And we should be having express value judgments about things, what things ought to be, and what goals of public policy ought to be. Not what should they be? So you begin dreaming and creating a real life. That's why we have, for instance, the SDGs. SDG number 1 is no poverty by 2030. You are dreaming this is what we ought to be as a world. You are prescribing. So after dreaming that we don't have to have, because international policy, like SDGs are policy, they begin influencing what we have as a country. For instance, our national development plan 3 is 85% aligned to the SDG agenda. So from the international to the national, how do you begin dreaming? Our vision 2040 says that Uganda should be a modern and prosperous middle-income country by 2040, where every Ugandan earns $95,000 per annum. So in 20 years from now, every Ugandan should be able to earn $95,000 per year. You know how much that is? That's around 34 million. How many people earn it here in a year? Because right now our GDP is $1,022, about 3.68 million shillings, which an average Ugandan earns in a year. So we are dreaming that in 20 years from now, 2040, we should be earning $95,000 per year. Every Ugandan, you can imagine how rich we shall be. So what ought to be? What do you want to see in the, so you, and then after prescribing, so that is the vision of the country in 20 years, 2040. You now begin providing solutions. We shall do this, we shall do this, we shall do that, we shall stop this, we shall increase production. I don't know if you get me. So, but of course, from policy science, it has moved. The field has moved over the years from policy science to public policy now. The actual understanding of government action or inaction. And the emphasis on the multidisciplinary approach has remained that you must incorporate law, you must incorporate economics, you must incorporate politics, you must incorporate sociology, development economics, and everything. But now there is a larger body of literature that is focused on public policy. And it is a discipline in itself. For instance, I am a student, I'm doing my MA in public policy. It is now a discipline of its own and a profession of its own, with its own concepts, concerns, vocabulary, and terminology. And you'll be hearing some of the terminologies as I will be saying them. But don't get scared, and I hope maybe it can help you to be inspired to take up public policy, because it is a virgin area. Professional, it's a virgin area. So now public policy becomes a field of institutional activity. For instance, you have Ministry of Health as an institution. So we have the National Health Policy. We have the UPE policy. We have the children's policy. I don't know if you're getting the national gender policy, environmental policy, because it becomes a field of institutional activity. Institutions with the activities, and the activities become policies, because now policy becomes, as we said in the second definition, of expression of desired state of affairs. So when policy becomes a given end, the institutions that are implementing it do institutional activities that become public policy. Ministry of Health, we have policies that are aligned to the Ministry of Health agenda. So second, it becomes an expression of a desired state of affairs. Cabinet intends to do this. You normally see these things. We shall open schools when 4.8 million people get vaccinated. Then we have political party manifestos, NRM saying, for instance, I know we shall inject 160 billion shillings into construction of cars. This is the NRM manifesto. Go and check it out. Of 2021-2026. Then, when it's defined as specific proposals, these are ministerial statements that cabinet makes on the floor of parliament. Then, decisions of government. An example, the Minister of Health has directed to provide incentives for hard-to-reach areas. Okay? The President has directed that the Prime Minister goes and rehabilitates in Bududa because they have been affected by floods. So, decisions of government are public policy. Programs, for instance, Youth Enablement Program is a public policy. Public service reform, the the Youth Venture Capital Fund, the social protection programs are public policy. So all government programs are public policy. I hope you understand that. And here now academically we get into what the government chooses to do or not to do, a proposed course of action within a given environment, providing obstacles or opportunities that public policy is proposed to utilize, overcome, and therefore to reach a goal. Then a set of directed decisions taken by political actors. Policy, we must understand this. Public policy must be taken by political actors. The role of formulating public policy is a preserve of the state or government. For us as non-state actors, we can only influence. I hope you're able to understand that. So we have now come from, we are now coming from a definition of public policy, because I wanted, as we go into it, we first understand what public policy is. To really understand it, so that when we are beginning to engage on these other concepts, we're able to understand it. So policy, in its, someone is going to say, is there a difference between public policy and economic policy? The thing is, there is no difference. Economic policy is part of public policy. I don't know if you can get me. Economic policy is part of public policy. Social policy is part of public policy. Our president from Nigeria, policy, monetary policy that is passed by the Bank of Uganda is part of public policy. Only that one is intended to fulfill a specific objective. So policy is a special kind of response, the central ordering element of which is an explicit statement of intent regarding future actions. For instance, now we have the national child policy, and the government is intending what are we to be doing to ensure that we have well-fed children, well-educated children, we have healthy children, we have well-protected children, we have children who are empowered and participating in children making. So government begins prescribing solutions which shall have free primary education, which shall ensure children are vaccinated by age 1. So you are giving a kind of response. You are making a statement of intent, what we will be doing to achieve what you want to achieve. So the policy response concept denotes what the agencies do in responding to environmental and structural stimuli. If there are floods in Bududa or Kasese, what is the government doing? So the environmental stimulus is the floods happening in Kasese, that the government now must go with money to relocate the people in Kasese, to remove waters and go and settle somewhere else. When the government goes with foodstuffs, it goes with blankets and mosquito nets. That is the response government is putting towards the stimulus that has been created by the floods. Structural stimuli. For instance, when in the 1980s, when the IMF and the World Bank came up with the structured adjustment programs, and the government is retrenching, is cutting itself small to get few people, is creating agencies and cutting the size of government so that you have more agencies. Electricity Regulation Agency, ERA, you're having URA, and which should be a preserve of the Ministry of Finance, because you want to reduce on the size of the Ministry of Finance. So here you are responding to structural stimuli. Structural stimuli can be international, global. You have the SDGs. So you come and realign so that you are in the order of the SDGs. You have the African Union Agenda 2063. You come and realign how you do work because you want to fit into the policy context, the policy blueprint or blueprint of the continental body, which is the African Union. You have the East African Vision 2050. And you come and align how you do things because you want to respond to the regional political dynamics and body politic of the prevailing area. So you are into the structural stimuli. So stimuli are structural or environmental. You are having inflation, COVID. People are going home. So you come up with fiscal policies like, for instance, let's say you're having cash transfers. You are transferring cash to people because you know they have lost their jobs. You are responding to the
Prosper, are you still there? I think Prosper is having an internet challenge now. We can just give him a few seconds and then he joins us again. He has texted me, he's joining in, he's trying to join in. People are calling him, but he's joining. Don't panic. Yes, we are sorry about that. Prosper, you can go ahead. Your audio is off. You can first have your audio on again. Prosper, you are muted. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about the internet challenges I'm having. I was saying the policy response is divided into policy statements. If you are keen on parliamentary business, you see ministers making policy statements on ministerial policy statements on a weekly basis. So they are showing the intent of what the government intends to do. Then a policy action is what an agency wants to do to accomplish the goals identified in the statement. So the minister makes a statement, for instance, on the floor of parliament and informs the house that they want to do this, and then they begin taking action. You normally see them asking, MPs asking the minister, so what are we doing for refugees? And the minister shall be doing this. So when they begin acting, they're now doing a policy action. Now, a policy result is what happens in the environment following the agency's efforts to achieve the goal achieved in the statement. So the result is an outcome of an action of a statement that was made that was made by a specific agency. So what then is policy? That one we have talked about it. So what are the natures of policies we should be talking about? Administrative policies. Here we, for instance, enforcing traffic laws, codes of conduct, rules of procedure, guidelines, etc. Those are administrative. Legislative, these are statutes and acts of parliament. Parliament has passed on corruption. Parliament has passed the law, legislative policies. Executive, these are decisions. The cabinet makes the decision to do this. We are directing this. Executive orders. The president is directing UNRWA to give all construction contracts to UPDF Engineering Brigade. That's an executive policy. Cabinet appointments, or executive appointments. The president has appointed Frank as the minister of Zoom and YouTube. That is a policy. It's an executive policy. Ratifications, for instance, Primus is here. He has been fighting for the ratification of the African Charter on democracy, elections, and governance. ACDEC. When it is ratified by cabinet, that is executive policy ensuring the intent of government on being complacent and compliant to legal requirements of the international political structure. Presidential directives, actually, yeah, that one is where there is always a big problem. For instance, the president and his wife is a minister of education. Now, we know that every time a president makes a directive, it becomes public policy. If you direct schools open today, it becomes policy and it must be acted on. So imagine the president is with his wife and they are in that act and he says, but schools should open. Does it become a policy, or what? Or at what extent do we make a distinction, a distinction between a president who's with his wife and a president who's with his minister? So presidential directives are matters of public policy. Then judicial policies. When the court decides to hear a case, when it is interpreting a law, when it makes written decisions, when it makes court judgments. And that's why some court judgments are used in determining cases according to Onesimus versus Frank, court decided like this. So they become judicial policies. Then some are non-decisions. What are we talking about? Government inaction. When the government chooses not to do something, women are being killed in Entebbe and there's nothing being done. That non-decision, that inaction is also a matter of public policy. I hope you have understood that. So there is a policy hierarchy, which is important that we understand that policy hierarchy. How do we begin getting to where we are? So policies begin with global policies, the international structure. In both economy, it is called the international financial superstructure. That today, if America withdrew from Afghanistan, stock markets will fall. The exchange rate won't fluctuate, it may go high or low. That if Twitter bans Trump from using Twitter, the Wall Street won't have issues. I don't know if you get more on that. So the international structure determines the level of policy that we have at the national level. Right now, the biggest overriding theme are the SDGs or Agenda 2030. Where do we want to see the world in 2030? Now, all countries in the world, because they do every 2 years voluntary national reviews. They review themselves on how they're implementing the SDGs and report to the UN. I have participated in one, and I'm trying to support the one for 2022, next year. So as countries are reporting, they have to be looked at as being compliant. And so we come something called the politics and optics of policy making. So the international structure determines on policy. So when you have SDGs, you will have, for instance, Uganda coming up with a new National Development Plan 3. It is 85% aligned to the SDG agenda. Are we together? Now, internationally, we are talking about the UN system. We are talking about regional entities. For instance, we are talking about African Union. We are talking about the East African Community. We are talking about COMESA. Now, African Union has something we call the Agenda 2043. 63. The Africa we want. Primus was a coordinator of that project sometime. The Africa we want project. Agenda 2063. So you will find Uganda trying to be aligned to the agenda of the African Union because it's a member state of the African Union. East African Community has Agenda 2050. You will find Uganda aligning itself, its policies, its laws, its practices, its programs into that agenda. Are we together? System-wide macro policies. These are larger. For instance, we talk about National Development Plan, Vision 2040. Those are system-wide. Then from there, we begin having like sectoral or line ministry policies. Ministry of Gender will find the gender policy, the national child policy, national youth policy, social protection policy, and the like in the Ministry of Gender. Then we come to administrative policies at the district level, where then organizational operational policies, those ones are, there's a trickle down. But then from a trickle down, you will find at the district level, for instance, we have the National Nutrition Action Plan. Many districts are coming up with district nutrition action plans. And sub-counties also come up with sub-county nutrition action plans. So you begin cascading from the center to the lowest echelon of the political administrative structure, which is always the parish level. So there's a framework for thinking about public policy. You can think about it in individual capacity, in groups, institutions, rules, and ideas created or shaped by the above. So institutions, how do you think about public policy in institutional setting? You talk about formal political institutions. These are the three branches of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. You talk about the districts, all local governments, the sub-counties and parishes. You talk about regional ties, but those are not there. You talk about the East African community integration, East African community coming up with policies. Right now, I know we are supporting the East African children's policy. So, and Uganda will always have to be aligned to it. You come up with global and continental rules and norms and practices. What is done at the global level that you must come and do? For instance, when the UN passed the Convention Against Torture, the CAT, Uganda also came and passed it and legislated it by domesticating it into an act of parliament, the Anti-Torture Act. But don't we have torture in Uganda? It is there. Why? We were legislating to fit into the global norms and rules that now globally people are against torture. So we must also show the world that we are against torture and we come and put in place a law against torture. Then some institutions are informal. They are informal. For instance, during elections, you would go to the Uganda Musician Association and get something easily, as opposed to going to parliament, because by that time the president wanted the support of the musicians. So there are no official channels, and you must understand them as a policy analyst, as a policy advocate. Without understanding the informal institutions, you always miss out. The media. If today media created a narrative on something, people will follow it. You know, the media created the narrative that Trump was a very bad person. Every day you go to CNN and they are hitting you with messaging on how Trump is bad. Or how Trump used Cambridge Analytica to create and accurate information that would be put certain people to indoctrinate them for him to be voted in 2017. So the media is a very powerful institution. I will share with you a group by now because I'm forgetting a title about the role of the media in shaping narratives, in shaping policy discourses, and in shaping policy decisions. Very important. Policy networks or communities. We are talking about think tanks. We are talking about think tanks. We are talking about think tanks here. I know there is one which is part of this, people organizing this training, CEPA, Center for Policy Analysis, CODE, GLIS. These are policy think tanks and networks, Makero University, these universities, academic institutions. And they make policy alternatives that government would be inclined to follow. Economic Policy Research Center at FEMA. The government would be inclined to follow because they think these are policy experts at it, but they are not official or institutions. Membership groups, these are NGOs like us. And these ones can involve interest groups, professional groups. Interest groups, we're talking about, for instance, the church. If the Catholic Church came and said, for us, we want to have something that is helping us that is helping us to have more women baptized, and it is a very serious interest group, you can be sure that government is going to take up the issue and work on it. So those are the actors that you must know in policies. Then understanding policy as a matter of rules. Some rules are formal. Laws, acts of parliament, ministerial regulations, organizational charts. If you go and actually they tell you the topmost person is the CD, then from the CD we have directors, then we have managers, we have this. Those are showing you how would you begin engaging. You know, the topest person is the first citizen who's the president, then the cabinet, then this, and you understand the formal rules they set on how you engage. Informal rules, favors, you call them and say, but I'm asking for a favor. Agenda setting, collateral networks, decision systems, these are informal. And they shape, and are also shaped by the institutions we have talked about, the formal institutions and the informal institutions. So rules that shape institutions, one is the Constitution. It creates very many things. It defines how governance will be done. We have the objectives of state policy and national something. We have the articles of the Constitution which say this one, Article 21. Article 1, power belongs to the people, and the like. We have acts of parliament. They enable the articles of the Constitution. And there are very many of them, almost on a daily basis, we have parliament passing an act. So institutions that shape rules are agencies that have power. For instance, URA will shape how we tax the taxation laws because they regulate taxation in the country. URA will determine how we are engaging on our roads because it's them running the transport sector. The local government's finance commission will determine how much money goes to the local governments because it's them that regulate how local governments are operating. Informal institutions that have unwritten rules and norms. For instance, if I married someone today, I wouldn't need to write a set of rules that, you know what, we do like this, but we know we shall be doing things. For instance, cultural institutions are informal. But they know if the Kabaka is coming, you don't make him see your back. You turn as if you reverse. Those are not written rules. And they're always powerful and actually even form the written rules. I was doing a study some time back in Lesotho last year on the forms of law in Lesotho. And they have two, it's one of the countries that have two forms of law. One is the common Roman law, which is the British system, you have a constitution, you have everything. And the second one is the traditional law. It is called the law of forgetting the real name. I would think about the law of Moshe. Yes, this man who studied history came up with a set of codes, canons that are not written, but people follow them. I can share with that study I did about many pages on the two forms of law in the Lesotho and how they determine the dynamics there, how people engage. Then we have institutional leadership choices which shape how laws are actually put into practice or implemented. For instance, if the president said, I am against bail, have you seen these MPs being granted bail? But the law has not been changed. But because he has power, his choices as leader can determine how laws are put in place and implemented. So ideas, which ideas do we have? What drives forward? Ideas come from groups and individuals in a broad way. So there are historical and environmental features shape policy. These are political. We have the constitution. For instance, we talk about separation of powers. We have the principle of checks and balances. We have regional governments. Now in Uganda, you don't focus on separation of powers because it's not there. When you are following the British law, the British system does not have separation of powers. In 1665, there was a British poet called John Bacon, and he wrote an essay called of the Judicature. There had been a fight between the King of Britain, King Henry by that time, with the Chief Justice, who was saying his powers were being curtailed by the king because he was overdetermining. And Bacon was writing and saying, no, you can't talk about separation of powers when it is the king who appoints the prime minister, who is the leader of government business in parliament, when it is the king who appoints the judges. So for instance, in Uganda, if the president appoints the prime minister, leader of government business in parliament, we are having MPs who are ministers, we are having judges and the chief justice appointed by the president. You can't talk of separation of powers. What you talk about is the principle of checks and balances, ensuring that the three arms of government, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, in some way have balances and checks between how they interact with each other. But separation of powers cannot be achieved. If it was to be achieved, it would have the chief justice, the president, and the speaker at the same level. All of them enjoying same privileges. But because the other is higher and actually determines how the others operate, you can't talk of separation of powers. You talk about the principle of checks and balances. You can do that essay by Bacon, 1665, of the Judicature. There's the social environment, there's the economic environment, and there's the technological environment. And those ones shape policy. For instance, Facebook shapes policy. That's why it is suspended in the country. If you want to know how powerful it is, because it could shape how voting could have been done. So these ones shall be coming into them. So I thought by taking you through this, and it says I'm breaking. I hope I am back. By taking you through this, I thought I would be able to set the clear context for us to be able to understand policy. So as we engage on how we want to influence this monster called policy, how do we influence it? Because for you to change the world, you must first understand it. You can't change what you don't understand. If you want to influence policy, you must be able to understand it. Is the policy symbolic? Do we have a policy window? Do we have multiple goals? Do we have no goals? Are we shifting goals? Are we contesting goals? Do we have the means to an end? Or we don't have those means to an end? That's why the first word was understanding public policy. And once you begin understanding public policy, I'm going to put up something called ment.com, so that you begin sharing your ideas. Just you log in, so that you share your ideas with me on how you understand the concept as I have explained it. And I am seeing we shall ask questions later. I am seeing my elder comrade Primus on, and I know you're supposed to open us off, but because he hadn't been able to join, I will now let him open us off. And then for us, we go back into our training things. Mr. Primus at Kwase Bahiji is a good comrade, a friend and a mentor in some ways. And Yeah, he's one of the good philosophers we have around when people talk about Emmanuel Kant and those dead philosophers, the dead European philosophers. You would not want him to stop. Primus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Prosper, can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you very well, Primus.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prosper, for contextual and introductory to this exciting training on policy. And on my part, I'm excited to be part of this training, the first of its kind, and also to see some of the young policy influencers on this platform. One may wonder why the policy now, why policy training now, and why is it vital for all of us. Prosper has already introduced me, so I will not introduce myself again. He has made some errors, but also made some right points about me. I do not philosophize, but I understand philosophy. And also, yes, Prosper is my very good friend and young brother. So back to the point, the whole point about policy is through interaction with young people, through interaction with policy influence, we realized a missing gap amongst young people, amongst young leaders in CSO, young leaders in political parties, and young influencers. And the gap was largely the understanding of the policy dynamics, policy making processes in this country, but also policy design. And the whole question about young people and influence is for us to influence policy, is for us to influence what happens in government as enshrined in Article 38 of the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda as amended. We have the right to influence policy individually or through organizations. We therefore thought it's very important, we thought it important to put in place a platform, that trains the whole concept about policy making process, both from national, local, and sub-local. When I talk about sub-local, I'm talking about lower local governments, local government, which is LC5, and then the national. And our greatest expectation is that after this training, we should be able to see articles, we should be able to see policy briefs coming from us, young people, and the people who have been trained as one of our action points. Last year, we embarked on a process which we've not given up on, of having a youth policy journal. And Prosper was critical to it, Frank Biaruhanga, Regan Wamaju, who is not here, of SEPA. And we had established a relationship with Parliament, the Parliamentary Institute, see how we have these policies reach the floor of Parliament. But then Prosper can tell you that getting about 7 articles or policy briefs was a struggle. And then we said, why don't we begin by having a training? So that when somebody is developing a policy briefs, he knows how to analyze a policy, how policy processes are made, and how a person can have an entry point into policy influencing, so that your policy brief is contextualized and is anchored on factual and actual gaps within the policy. Because some of the things that we got were like articles and not exactly policy briefs. So that's why we put in place this training, which is going to be really a signature training for global platform and SEPA, happening on a quarterly basis, so that we have a pool of young people who understand policy and policy influence. I'm also happy to see on the group and in the training some people who are aspiring to be members of parliament. I've seen the former aspirant for Ruchiga, women MP, and I think for her this training is further vital, because a leader, Robin Sharma talks about leaders without titles. All of us do not need to be in parliament or in local government to influence what happens there. We should be social movement builders. We should be able to mobilize our constituents, but you can only rally your constituents and mobilize your people around their interests, around what touches them most. So for example, today we have high levels of unemployment. Who is writing about it? Who is giving alternatives on how unemployment can be solved? We are talking about high teenager pregnancies. Who is writing alternatives? Who is sharing policy briefs? Who is sharing, and I hope Prosper is going to take us through all these, advocacy messages? Who is doing it to ensure that there is an alternative on what is happening? So at a later stage, we hope we'll have a think tank through our policy journal, a think tank of young people who will be meeting on a regular basis to brainstorm, to discuss, but shape the policy discourse in this country. I honestly believe that the time for lamentation is over. We should be looking at the book of Revelation. And in the book of Revelation, we offer solutions. We do not lament about problems. Problems become projects. If a problem is teenager pregnancy, if a problem is healthcare systems, if a problem is education, we should be organizing and not agonizing on how to solve that problem. As citizens, the mandate and the challenge of making this country work is in our hands, and we can make a contribution using the various approaches. We recognize that the space for civic organizing is shrinking, but there are alternatives that cannot be silenced. Madiba, one of the greatest leaders in the world, organized South Africa and ended apartheid in the most difficult civic shrinking space, which was racial, political, and otherwise. Our forefathers who fought independence, they actually do not have even social media, they do not even have internet like we do, but they organized and they are able to restore and at least bring independence that we can discuss today, whether it was full independence or a resemblance of independence. So the challenge before us as young people, as people who aspire to make a difference, is the need to work hard. Is the need to throw away the boxes that are on our heads and begin to focus on creating solutions and alternatives. We have become people who want to remain behind our phones, on Twitter, on WhatsApp. We have become people who don't want to risk. We have become people who want things on a silver platter. If we have to shift, we will not just shift, but we must be able to sacrifice and make the shift that we want. Once again, and most importantly, as a global platform and Action Aid, we'll continue to offer this platform for us to deliberate and be able to influence. I want to emphasize that at the end of this training, at least each one of us should be able to write a policy brief that can inform our next policy journal. And of course, for Prosper, who is leading us through this process, is to ensure that we have policy journals flowing now that we have a pool and a constituents of many young people who are partaking and getting to understand all aspects about policy brief. Otherwise, I want to wish you a successful training. The administrative issues will be communicated by Frank, but importantly, let's spare our time and focus and utilize this one-off time to learn as much as possible on policy making process, on policy influencing processes, and policy design processes. You do not know where you'll be. You could be an LC5, you could be a councillor, you could be an MP. And trust me, you will remember the 5 days that you spent with various people who are going to be taking us through these important sessions. I want to thank you and wish you wonderful 1 week, 5 days training. Thank you, Prosper, for sparing your time, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Primus, for opening us up officially. In your delay, we have done one session, but thank you for the great remarks you've given. Yeah, I have also seen colleagues here who I know are very much interested in leadership and taking it forward. And that's why I want to make it, stop the jargons that come with policy and be as simple as it can be, so that all of us are able to learn. And as I said, the 5th rule for this meeting is let's learn. Let's learn. Like, let us all learn, so that by the time we leave here, all of us have been able to benefit from this training, not only one person. Beyond being a trainer, I'm also interested in learning, because learning never stops. So kindly be free and make your voices heard. So I can take a few questions. I tried to do it on menti.com, but it seems you are not familiar with Menti. I thought you would just log into it and then type the questions for us to work on. But it seems we are not familiar with Menti. The link I shared there, so you can raise your hand and ask. 30 minutes of this, and then we go for a break and come back. 30 minutes of question and answer. Any question? You can raise your hand, and I will surely see you. Questions on what you understood by public policy, because if we get into the optics, into the policy making processes, it's going to be a little bit more technical. So I wanted you to at least make your questions now, so that we first understand this monster first. No one is raising their hand. Even Magara Brian. Even Magara Brian is not raising his hand.
There is one hand, King.
Yes. Frank? Okay, yeah, I can see people raising their hands.
Yes, King, you can unmute yourself, and then you ask the question or compliment or the contribution.
Yes, hello.
Yes, we can.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for the work done. And my question is, I wanted only to ask on the public policy. Most of the time, those policies are always made by the public people, always from their committees. And my question is, after making them, do they also go on and follow those policies to see whether they are working? Or because I can see sometimes they always do their work on paper, and they show themselves on TVs and what that they have made some policies to work on. Either, like, for example, we talked about the policy of Kavera policy, but those guys stopped on actually acting on paper making. They didn't even go on and see whether because they talked that they said even the factories that are making those bovera, porcelain papers, porcelain bags, porcelain papers, they should stop within a country. But after making that policy Kavera, just like how Rwanda did, they kept quiet. and these factories kept on making more and more. So I think the public policy makers, they are not serious at all on moving on to carry out monitoring and investigations on their policies that they do make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, King. Primus, Prosper, I hope you've noted that question and the concern. So, Vincent.
Hello, am I
Yes.
loud and clear?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Frank, and I want to thank Primus for that elaborate discussion. Well, in your definition, in your preamble, you tried to zero down the understanding of public policy as what government chooses to do or not to do. So my question is, what happens in an event that there is a policy in writing, but the government, for example, has acted contrary to the policy? In an event that there's a policy on paper, but it has not been implemented, we as policy influencers, how do we go about that? For example, pursuant to Article 24 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, 1995, as amended in 2006, it is against inhuman and degrading treatment as a right. So what happens in an event that state actors, for example, police, is torturing civilians on the street? Maybe those who are engaged in a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration, but all of a sudden the police tortures them, and it is against the law. So what happens? We as policy influencers, how do we go about that? There's a policy in place, but those in power, those with authority, have acted against it. I remember Mr. Vincent, a project coordinator, Bagun Community Association, CBU based in the Bolisa district. Looking forward to interact with you once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for that question. Yeah, so Prosper, you can be responding to these two questions as we wait for more.
Yeah, actually, there are some I even saw in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, one is most policies are made by policymakers, by public people. Do they go on and follow them? Now, if you remember, I classified the types of public policies under legislative, executive, judicial, and others. If you remember very well that first in the presentation I made. Now, legislative policies, these are laws. Now, people who make laws are not even lawyers, by the way. If you go in parliament, you'll find teachers, you'll find social workers, you'll find drunkards, you'll find anyone there, as long as you have senior six and you can win an election. But we are making a law. So once parliament makes a law, of course the law is binding. Now, there is something I should maybe make clear here is a policy is not binding. A policy is guiding. A law is binding. For instance, now if there is, as Vincent has taken us through article, was it 21 or 24, which is against inhuman and degrading treatment? If someone does it, they can be taken to court. But today, if I don't implement the national child policy, I cannot be taken to court. Why? It is not a law. It is a policy showing this is where we want to be going. So I think we should understand that now. If MPs make a law, which becomes now a legislative policy, it is upon the ministry, the line ministry in charge of that law. For instance, if it is the necessary bill as of now, the line ministry is Ministry of Finance. So Ministry of Finance should be able to come up with the ministerial regulations. Now, ministerial regulations are technical guidance on how the law will be implemented, because those who made the law are politicians, they are not technical. I don't know if you're getting on that. That Parliament makes a law, passes it, it is guiding. I mean binding. If you go against it, you'll be arrested. But those are politicians who made the law. They are not lawyers, they are not technical people. So you take the law to the ministry, which is in charge of that law, and the ministry comes up with a policy or ministerial regulations to put in effect the law. Now, there is one thing, I think when I bring this one to answer most of the questions here, there's one thing which we call the policy framework, legal framework, and institutional framework. Now, to effectively run a country, you need the legal framework because it is binding. It tells you what to do, what not to do. If you do, these are the consequences. Are we together? The policy framework is guiding you. This is where we are going, and this is how we get there. So the policy framework operationalizes the legal framework. We have the National Children's Act as amended 2016. We have the National Child Policy 2020. So the National Child Policy puts into operation the law, which is the National Children's Act 2016. I'm not sure if people are getting me, because I can't see your faces and it's hard to understand. Now, but then the policy framework in itself is insufficient. So you must have what we call the institutional framework. What is the institutional framework? That is the ministry. For instance, the National Children's Act, then you have the National Children's Policy, and then you have the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development, which has now the right institution and the structure. It has a probation officer, so it can know this child has been fired here, this child has been neglected. We are now, we have the police to enforce that act. We have the office of the probation officer at the district, we have the community development officer at sub-county level, we have the parish chief to bring the policy and the law to the local person. So the institutional framework puts fresh on the skeleton, which is the law and the legal framework, and which is the legal and the policy frameworks. I'm not sure if you're understanding one of this, and we must get it very clear that a legal framework is insufficient if we have no policy framework, and the two of them are insufficient if we have no robust institutional framework. These are the ministries, the government departments and agencies, and then the district councils and those officers, probation officer, and the like. For instance, let us talk of you can pass a law against corruption, but if you don't have that corruption code, then your law may never be implemented. If you don't have a division within police that is specialized in detecting, investigating, and prosecuting corruption cases, your law will remain what we call window dressing. Very good policies, very good laws, no implementation, which we have in Uganda. So we'll be looking at having a very robust institutional framework. So do they follow up and make? If MPs have made a policy or a law, they are charged with also legislate with oversight functions, so they can follow up and see. There is what we follow to know how laws are being passed. Is called the post-legislative scrutiny. It's an emerging field. You use it to measure. Before the law came in place, what was there? Now that we have a law, is there a change? Then you can use it to inform amendments. They don't know how long policies take before they can be amended because we find they're not active. A law can be amended even today. If we pass it today and we find it's not active, we can amend it. A policy is not amendable. What is done is policies have a lifespan of 10 years. After 10 years, they are supposed to be reviewed, either brought back or a new policy brought back. For instance, in 2004, Uganda passed the Orphans and Other Vulnerable Children's Policy, 2004, OVC Policy 2004. People have heard why, for instance, Canada must be knowing it because it's in the children's rights movement. So, after its expired, when we were reviewing, we discovered it was not enough. It was talking about vulnerable children, but some children are not vulnerable. So that's why government came up with the children's policy, which now takes into perspective all the children. You don't have to be an orphan or vulnerable for you to be taken to be captured by the police. I don't know if I'm clear. So policies normally have a 4-year, I mean a 10-year lifespan, after which they are reviewed and a new one brought or the other one brought back as it is in the case the objectives are not attended and it is still workable. Then there are things we call, for instance, national strategies. For instance, in social protection, we have the social sector strategic plan. That's a public policy on how social protection will be done by the Ministry of Gender. They are normally into 5-year phases and they follow the national development plan, which is a 5-year phase. So after those 5 years, they expire, they become obsolete, and a new one is brought up. On the government acting contrary to the policy, here, you know where Sehad took government court over the rising case of maternal death and the court found government to be culpable and guilty of negligence. But what SEA had used here was not a policy, it used the law. That, for instance, when you read our constitution, there are articles which are very clear on right access to health and everything. Though we have the health policy, but health policy would not have been sufficient to find government culpable and guilty. So the time take, you have to, if for you to hold the government liable for not doing what is in the policy, you use a law, not a policy, because a policy is only operationalizing the law. It is giving effect. It is giving fresh to the law. So the law is a little bit thin. You find an act is like 2 pages, 5 pages, but a policy is always bigger because it is detailed and is showing you how to do. And then you must have a very good, robust institutional framework for you to implement. How do policymakers make laws? Ideally, they should be consulting. They consult people on what they want to do. They consult you, consult the people, and people give them their views. But some policies are just made from there. But what I know is most policies are always out of consultation. They call people and get to know and get to know their views before those policies are made. And that's why you see even when government is making laws, they always call people to come and interface with the committee and give the committee their views on what they think should be done. That's why you saw when they wanted to touch the Constitution Act 112, they moved through villages and were holding areas so people can allow you touch it. And we allowed that they touch it. So don't say they didn't ask. How does a lot of answer the long text to this is what I saw here. Then let me see from the chat room. How do you really measure the impact of public policy? How do you measure the impact? One, I have said there is something we call post-legislative scrutiny. Before public policy is made, we also do what we call an assessment. You first, because a policy is coming to solve a problem. For instance, let us say the youth employment strategy by Ministry of Gender. So if we are saying 2020, 15% of young people are not employed, and you come up with the youth employment strategy. After 5 years, they are now 19% who are not employed. You can come and say, you see, when the policy was coming in from your own justification for the policy, we only had 15% who are not employed. Now we have 19% after 5 years. So the policy is ineffective and not working. If it is a law, as I said, we do what we call post-legislative scrutiny. It is also a virgin field. A few people know it. I've met a few who can do post-legislative scrutiny. It's an emerging field within public policy, which is used to measure the effectiveness of a law. But it's always after some time, after maybe like 3 years, you can now come and be able to measure it. And now you measure, for instance, the effectiveness of a law. You'll go on things like, do you have ministerial regulations for the law? Have the necessary institutional structures been put in place? And the like. On how we influence, if government does not respond, we are coming there. Kairisha is running very, 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 very fast. We shall come there. Thanks, Proper and Prosper, for the wonderful insight. I made just end up on paper. Yes, I've talked of window dressing. Window dressing. What happens in the event there is a policy on paper and nothing's being done? What can policy influencers do? That's what I'm coming to it. In the next sessions we shall be doing. Which other question am I? Public policy refers to laws, okay, and executive policy is consulted from public before. Yes, sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. Consultation is always is not a constitutional right. It comes as and when the policymaker decides to do it. Sometimes cabinet makes consultations. You recently saw one where they were saying that people going abroad should not be having to present certificate of compliance from Interpol. I think that could have come out of complaints by the people. So sometimes out of consultation and out of what people think should be done, and then they take a decision and make those directives. But sometimes, for instance, when NRM came into power, 1986 to 26 January, they passed legal decree number 1, which suspended the constitution. There was no consultation. So sometimes no consultations are done. It's just because of the it's the nature of the state that determines do we consult or do we consult. Some decisions are ad hoc. For instance, when they were closing us off into lockdown, they didn't have to consult because it was an emergency. But so you could take the lockdown as Uganda's policy on containing the spread of the COVID-19. It doesn't have to be written on it public policy. No. If government has said we are locking down the country, it becomes public policy. Closing school is public policy on containing the pandemic. I'm trying to see the other comments within what do you group these measures that the president passes in his address? Yeah, these are part of the executive policies, where some can be directives and they are grouped under executive policies. Sylvia, I think I've answered that question of yours there. I'm trying to look for other questions in the comment section, and I see if I can answer them. Yeah, Sylvia, you raised your hand, you can talk. As I look for questions. Sylvia, you can talk, it's fine.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I raised that question of those measures that the president put in place, and you said they are executive policies, right? Okay,
Yes,
someone made this statement that third world countries best deserve those the dictatorship the leaders who are like dictators. I really don't know if it is true, but for me, what I've seen on ground is like these policies, most local people are not informed about them. I thank you so much for taking like this effort to take us through, but the truth is most of us were very, very behind concerning these policies. And I think that is the reason why it doesn't work. You find there is a policy maybe for the children as the examples you've given, but most parents are not aware of it, and then like things are happening, but people are not aware that they have policies that protect them. So I really feel like in our country today, like those presidential addresses, they are the things that are like so effective compared to those things that pass through parliament, through what, because now like when the president gives those executive measures, you find everyone is aware that when is the president addressing? He's addressing on Tuesday. What did he say? You find even the person who doesn't have a radio at least knows what the president is talking about, and everyone follow, and you find the police are on ground to ensure that these executive policies are followed. So I really don't know how best we can make other policies that are not executive policies effective like these executive ones, because I feel like there are too many procedures, not like the ones you are mentioning, the frameworks and those things. There are really too many. I feel that is one of the reasons why the policies are not all that effective. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. One, policies are too many, yeah, because government is run on policies. Every decision the government takes is a policy. A national budget is a government policy. It is showing you where they're going to fund, which area are they funding. So if they don't find an area you have been advocating for, no, they have said not to do it. So it is also part of that. So everything government does, when the president is speaking, many of those declarations he makes are policies. When he says local curfew is a policy right now. When they shut down Facebook because they are fearing it has security implications, that is the security policy the country is taking at that point in time. So policies are many because what government runs on policies. Policies are the fuel of running government. The same way you go to a car, you have to put petrol, diesel. If you go to a government, you have to put policies. Everything government does is a policy. Every decision of government is a policy. So just understand it like that. And on your question of people not understanding them, I agree, because policy, we have been taking it as an elitist field. People have gone to school, what, and you can see many of us who are into the policy field come with very good English, which does not speak to the common person. But I'm glad that institutions like Action are taking it down to the people. And that's the same question that I think it was Winnie who asked it, and she was asking about, can policies be formulated at the district level? Yes. No, it was Vicky. Can policies be formulated at the district level? Yes, because according to the Local Government Act, districts are body corporates. Body corporates in law can be sued or sued. They can make decisions on their own. That's why they pass budgets. That's why they have district development plans for 5 years to guide how they will operate that 5-year period. That's why they pass laws which are called district ordinances. You go on many of them, you'll find ordinance on corporal punishment, ordinance on GBV. Those are laws, those are policies at that level. And that's why I was saying, you know, when you are doing according to the principle of decentralization, I told Dr. Rukundo Drake to come and talk about it on Wednesday. I hope he comes through. So in the process of decentralization, you have what we call the principle of delegated legislation. That yes, Parliament is mandated with passing of laws, but it can delegate those powers to the lower local governments. The lower local governments are the district council, which has the LC5 councillors, and the sub-county council. So the district council can pass what we know as district ordinances. For instance, so you as advocates at a local level, what you need to do to look for is which laws are we trying to advocate for at a national level? For instance, like for me, North Division, I've been advocating for a law on human sacrifice. So Parliament passed the Prohibition and Prevention of Human Sacrifice Act 2021. So now it's up to me to go and build the capacity of my field teams down there to influence districts they work in to pass ordinances on human sacrifice. So you are localizing a national legislation through, and you are having a local legislation that speaks more to the aspirations of the people you are governing at that center. You can now go down to a sub-county level and you have a sub-county bylaw on the same law. So districts, sub-counties, higher local governments and local governments are mandated to harness the principle of delegated legislation to pass laws at their level to ensure effective implementation of those laws. And that's the only way you can have, if you talk of checking the effectiveness of laws, as Karisha asked, those are things you should be looking out for. If you're having a law stopping at the national level, it will be ineffective. You have to have it localized through what I've called the principle of delegated legislation. The second principle for you to have laws and these policies at the local level is what we call the subsidiarity principle. Because the assumption should be that governance comes from the bottom and goes up. That's why we localize it. That's why we decentralize it. That the LOC informs what is done at LOC5 level. That one informs what is done at the national level. But it's not happening in the principle. But for the subsidiarity principle, it means that a lower local government, a district, a sub-county can do the same work the central government can do. It can pass laws, it can pass budgets, it can pass policies. If you're in your district like mine and you feel that there is a lot of malnutrition, the district can pass a law on how to tackle malnutrition in that district. If there is a lot of school absenteeism, you can pass a policy and say, for this is our plan on tackling school absenteeism in the district, because you are harnessing the subsidiarity principle. Subsidiarity is you are doing the same thing that the higher local government can do. Delegated legislation is that you are getting the laws that are passed that are the ambit of the national legislature and legislating them and localizing them to fit the context in which you operate. Hallelujah. Brethren, you are all kept quiet. So I was asking Vicky's question. Then she again says, but you say the policies are not legally binding. That means if people go against the executive policy, they shouldn't be sanctioned. So why do they arrest those who defy curfew? Yes. The president said, you stop moving at 7 p.m. You know what they did? The Minister of Health went to Parliament and took ministerial regulations. If you remember, Parliament passed ministerial regulations on how to handle the COVID-19 pandemic. And those ministerial regulations were now regularizing what the president had made in his speech of 18th March 2020. Vicky, am I clear? You can meet and say and tell me. Vicky is saying, you say the policies are not legally binding. That means if people go against the executive policies, they shouldn't be sanctioned. So why do they arrest those who defy curfew yet it's not in a legal framework? And I will repeat, the president on 18th March came with a raft of measures that would be used to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Among them was closure of schools, was institution of curfew, was suspending transport and everything. After talking like that, the Minister of Health, Dr. Jane Ruth Acheng, went with ministerial regulations and took them to Parliament to enact them. They were not laws, they were just now legislating what the President had made as executive policies, now making them legally binding. I hope I'm clear on this. And you understand it. So before you say that, you first go and see what is happening in the Parliament. Because you know what's happening in the Parliament, you say, no, executive powers are not binding, but you find the Parliament has already legislated on it, because after the President has talked, they take to the Parliament to ratify that. So you can be arrested. And I think Regan will take us through it later on for people to clearly understand these dynamics. And I would want, as young people, it's better you understand these things very well. So that you said you are role models in whatever you are doing. Policies are guiding, laws are binding, but most times the two of them are twins. The same way if you have your coin, I have my 500 here. There is a tail, there is a head. So there are two sides of the same coin. Most times when a law is passed, a policy will be passed to operationalize it. Most times if a policy is passed, is adopted by government, a law will be brought to make it legally binding. The difference is one is going to be called a policy, a strategy or action plan, another will be called an act of parliament. The Children's Act, Children's Policy. The National Policy on Disaster Management and Preparedness. And you come and have a Disaster Act. You have the Youth Policy, 2016. You have the Youth Act, actually 2016. Are we together? And also to note that legally binding, you go in the Constitution, there is something we call Directives of State Policy and Principles of something. I'm forgetting the right title. It is in the Constitution, it's about 20 pages. And they begin telling social protection, gender equality, what. So if the gender policy is passed, it already has a legal binding in the Constitution through those directives of state policy. I hope I was clear on that. And without further ado, I don't know if there is any other question. I don't know if there is any other question, so that people can go for break and grab a cup of coffee. Any other question? One I could have missed. Yes, Frank.
I think we can go for the break and then maybe we come. Yeah, for now, yeah.
But you avoid having break without tea.
you said the tea.
No, you are the person making logistical announcements. So let people not have break without tea. People should have tea. We should have break tea. Okay, friends, let's meet here in 20 minutes. So you can do it.
Okay.
You don't have to log out.
Okay. So let's have a break for 20 minutes, and then at 11:23 we are going to start off. Thank you so much, Prosper and Primus.